Welcome back to On the Same Team, the podcast about fostering collaboration, building relationships, and creating shared success. Today, I'm excited to welcome someone who has personally impacted my own journey in leadership and giving, Paul Erbes. Paul and I had the opportunity to work together at Morningside University, where he taught me so much about the value of giving, not just financially, but in the experience. His insights help shape the way I think about leadership, relationships, and community impact. Paul has spent over 30 years in faith-based philanthropy, higher education, and nonprofit leadership. Currently the Vice President of Habitat for Humanity in Baltimore, and he's focused on affordable housing and stronger communities. Paul's journey started on a farm in southern Minnesota, the youngest of 10 kids. Then he began a Lutheran pastor, helping congregations grow financially, spiritually, and he worked with Thrivent Financial, Global Refuge, and multiple universities, helping organizations build sustainable giving programs. But one of the most incredible things about Paul is his global impact. He's helped build homes in over 25 countries, and I've heard some of those stories. Beyond his professional work, Paul's a diehard Orioles fan, a 15-time marathon runner, and someone who has dedicated his life to making the world a better place. In today's episode, we'll talk about his journey, the lessons he's learned about giving, and why generosity, whether financially, time, or resources, creates an experience that is just as valuable for the giver as it is for the recipient. All right, let's dive in. Paul, welcome to On the Same Team podcast. Thanks again for doing this.
Jacob, thank you so much. And those kind words are really amazing. But it's so great to see you again. And I look forward to our conversation today.
The best part of it all is just, connecting with you again and chatting again. So, well, can you start off? Tell me a little bit about growing up with 10 siblings, or were you 10 and there's 9 siblings?
I was the 10th, and so I was the youngest. I was the baby of the family, so I was not spoiled at all. But no, it was just, we had our own baseball team growing up, so it worked out great. All the neighbor kids would come to our place because there was always someone to play with and stuff. So it just was a great opportunity. And again, just growing up in that environment, growing up around siblings and stuff, you learn to get along, you learn to problem solve, you learn to find your own styles of leadership and your own identity. So it was such a gift that prepared me for my future. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in southern Minnesota, you lived on a farm. Like, what kind of farm did you guys do? What were some of the activities that you guys, did daily?
So growing up on the farm, we had kind of a really classic farm in the 60s and 70s. So we had crops and cattle and pigs and chickens, and we all had our chores. We all had assigned responsibilities. And I think that's a really important piece. If I can go off on a tangent here, when I was in Wyoming, there was one of the Wyoming legislators that said, farming gives you children the best education because they always are conscious of where the family's income comes from. And most children don't grow up with that awareness. Mom or dad goes off to work and brings home a paycheck, and so it just appears. But to have that consciousness and being part of growing the family's sustainability is an important piece that was a gift for me and certainly a gift for others.
Yeah. That's one thing. I don't know if we had cattle when you and I were meeting and chatting, consistently, but I have 3 head of cattle on my little hobby farm now. And I love that aspect of they're seeing kind of, where that comes from, and they get to help raise it. And I mean, it's hard because they get attached to it, and there's emotions with having animals, but it's also valuable to me to have them raise it and be a part of that process. I definitely, that isn't our income necessarily, but I do value the part. Same thing with our garden. I love that we grow our own food in the summer. And I think there is a lot to them growing up with that experience and saying, like, we have to do the work to get the food. We have to do the work to get the meat. And same thing with our eggs. It's like, if they don't go out and get them right now, our eggs freeze. And I'm like, hey, you just wasted 6 eggs because you're too lazy to get your butt out there and get it done. So they don't get eggs the next day, and there's a consequence for not doing your stuff.
Well, and those are all life experiences that your children will carry with them into their adulthood and into their professional careers. And it will impact in lots of ways as they take on responsibility for whatever business they're in, for their coworkers. All of that translates through. Just like athletics, you learn something that translates and really helps shape leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, kind of going into the next thing I really, talked about in the bio was just, you know, I was blessed to be able to meet with you, during our time together at Morningside, and now we're both moved on from there. But, one of the things that I really enjoyed was getting to know more about the experience of the giver, and you've had a lot of experience in, fundraising and giving. And as somebody that was asking for a gift consistently from people, but I wasn't in it professionally. I was a professional coach. It was great to have somebody that, did it professionally and could, one, you provide me with some books that really helped me, but also just hearing you talk about the experience the giver gets to have. That was huge and really opened my eyes to looking at it as like, I got to create an opportunity for somebody to feel great, and that's what giving is. And that was a good mindset change for me, and really turned me onto the idea of looking forward to giving too, seeing it my own, like I does feel good. It feels good for me too. And, like searching out those opportunities to feel good and to give, I mean, it's the best feeling because, I don't know if people are ever more appreciative than when you give to them.
No, I think you're right. And to me, that's the absolute core of philanthropy is absolutely understanding the donor and understanding the difference in the impact that they want to make in terms of, and it comes through at all levels. In my work here in Baltimore with Habitat for Humanity, I do a lot more engagement with major corporations and major national corporations and stuff that I didn't do as much in smaller nonprofits or in the university setting. But I had a conversation with one of our major corporations in town last week that we're working on this phenomenal partnership. And at the end of the day, it's actually the senior vice president that I'm meeting with wants that emotional impact to be able to share with their employees that this is the difference we're making on our community. And so I'm promoting all of this. We can share your brand with them. We can promote you. I can do advertising for you if you contribute to us. And at the end of the day, they still want that feeling that says, I've changed the world, or I'm making a difference, or I'm making this a better place to live because of our ability to engage. So it's still at the core of it is the takeaway in terms of, I want to change the world and here's how I can do it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you kind of answered my next question. Something I was thinking about getting ready for this is, how does that change from institution to institution? I mean, do you find, different spaces that people can impact your institution, with that same core foundation of like giving them that opportunity to change the world? Or like, yeah, just can you explain to me a little bit on how, you've worked at different places that probably have a different mission and different goal, right?
Exactly. Well, and the first piece is that it has to align with the donor's passion. And so I'll do research and I'll look. And so like John Smith, that may be incredibly generous toward curing diseases. And so that they really want to invest in medical research. They really want to invest in providing medicines to others and stuff. That person may not be as interested in building houses or saving the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to be just honest with donors in terms of this may not meet your needs or this may not really fulfill as much. Certainly we want to invite anyone to be supporters of our mission. But we also need to be honest with them and help guide them to see where they can get the greatest joy. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't bring the donor joy, on a practical level, it's not sustainable. But on the really core level, to me, it's not appropriate. If it doesn't bring the donor that ultimate joy, you've missed the whole power of giving.
When you're working for Morningside, is it alumni that you're really focused on, and or is there opportunity outside of alumni that you're like, hey, they love giving to education, like, and I'm just curious because, I'm a Morningside alum, and that's
Sure.
something I'm passionate about still. But, like at the end of the day too, like I loved the experience people had. And I know that experience happens at other universities too. So like, and just in my head, I don't close myself off to the other opportunities to help somebody at maybe Bar Cliff, or, even though I probably shouldn't say that publicly, but, um, like that's the reality of how I feel, but I was just curious if that's something where you're, when you're working for university, if you focus on alumni, or if you see if there's like just a path to opening up those doors to other people too, or kind of how that works.
Really kind of two responses to that. Number one, absolutely. Alumni, people that were engaged or connected emotionally to the school, to the institution, are your best audience. And
Yeah.
Morningside has such phenomenally loyal alumni. And there are alumni that have gone from this small college in Sioux City, Iowa, to all around the country, to lots of different industries, and have made a huge impact. That's all the tentacles of what it means to be part of Morningside. And so it just is, again, it's an incredible thing to celebrate in terms of the diversity there. So yes, people that are connected to the school absolutely have a much easier way of giving to that. But then you have this whole other area that universities provide, because you have so many areas of expertise. So Morningside's doing a lot of work in agricultural work, but they're also doing a lot of work in business. They're doing a lot of work in certainly other areas of discipline, in marketing, and all of those other areas. The nursing school, the education school, all of those specific careers can impact people based around their passion. So I may not have any connection to Morningside and having been alum from another school, but if I'm passionate about nurses, because I was in the hospital 6 months ago and there was a nurse there that took really good care of me, and I heard those stories when I was at Morningside, is people gave to Morningside sometimes just out of the blue because we had a nursing program and they wanted to say thank you. We were the vehicle for them to be able to express that. So that's a great opportunity that places like Morningside has, is you can engage people around the whole sphere of the educational curriculum there that triggers passion for particular donors, as well as just the alignment to and the absolute loyalty to Morningside itself.
Yeah. And when you're saying that, I do think about that. And like one of our biggest supporters played basketball, did not go to Morningside. And he wasn't a big financial supporter, but he gave his time relentlessly, and he was so passionate about wrestling, even though, he just met people in wrestling that he liked, and then he's like, gosh, I want to get more involved. And so he stayed connected, and he found Morningside. He got connected to us. And, like the friendship I have with him is still strong. And, but yeah, that just kind of brought up that memory where, he's tall and skinny. Like you're like, that is a basketball player for sure, but he's just found a passion with this. And, I thought it's pretty cool. So, and I think like, that's one of the things, talking to you today, like I met you late in my coaching career, and I think it's something that, just the confidence to ask and to know these things again happened later in my career. And I wish I would have had a little more of that to start my career and been more involved in that. And because I think I've met great people that, if I would have gave them the opportunity to support the program and support the athletes that were there, they would have been super excited about that, and they would have got a ton of value for it. But, it came more from like my lack of confidence and understanding in the process than it did from their not wanting to give, and so I was
Sure,
I was
sure.
thankful that, we did talk about it, and I got more acclimated with it, and had a passion for it when I was, wrapping up my career. But yeah, so hopefully, there's some young coach out there that can listen to this and be like, all right, I got to give people the opportunity to be more involved with my program, because that's really what it is. It's an opportunity for them to feel good and to support what they love.
Well, and to your credit, though, what you did demonstrate was the opportunity and the excitement for learning. You always wanted to get better and you always wanted to learn. I mean, I think our first conversation, that's the first thing when you and I had our first conversation that you and I had, I think that's what my takeaway was. This is a guy who constantly wants to learn new things and get better. And you and I both know that is absolutely the key to success. I mean, I look back on my 30 years and I was stumbling into this and made so many mistakes and made such a fool out of myself in the first year and did last year as well. And so it's just the opportunity to learn from that and still be who we are with integrity. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell like my wrestlers, and I think it's just across life, like just shoot. At the end of the day, shoot, and you'll learn something from that. It might be a tough lesson, or it gives you confidence, but one way or the other, you're going to have an outcome that makes you better. And if you don't shoot, you're not going to learn anything. So you got to shoot and just be relentless in your shots. And, I always said it's a snowball. You shoot 10 times your first match, then you're going to be a little bit better in that second. And that 10 shots, you're going to learn more. So you got to shoot. Just keep shooting, guys. I'd love to chat about what you're doing now. I know you're with Habitat, and I know that was a huge passion when you're here in Sioux City too. And that's something that I've been semi-involved in. I had a wrestling team that had 30 guys that could go out and help with a house, and give a lot of free labor. So we did that. Now I'm getting more involved in other sides of Habitat, which I'm super excited about. But can you, just fill me in a little bit more about what you're doing? Because I don't know exactly what you're doing now, even though I know you're involved with Habitat.
Okay, excellent. Sure, glad to. So let me step back a bit. So I've been involved with Habitat for really over 30 years. So Habitat actually was formed in about 1974. And though when people think that President Jimmy Carter started it, President Jimmy Carter got actively involved after he completed his presidency. So he was a real visible volunteer for us, but he wasn't the founder of it. We certainly learned from his example throughout. So I got involved when I was living in Colorado and my first Habitat, and that's where I learned that we wanted to get a group from my church there to help build a house one day. And so we spent a day there and just became passionate about it. So quick overview of what the Habitat model is. Probably the biggest misunderstanding of Habitat is they think that we give homes away. When actually we construct homes or remodel homes and sell them to low-income people. And we sell them to them with a full mortgage with a 0% mortgage. So all of our homes then are sold to families with 0%. And the family qualifies for them by going through about 9 months of classes and training, as well as sweat equity. So they participate in either supporting the organization or most directly building their house. So it just has so much meaning and value for that, but also then has the sustainability. We want this house to be their home for the next generation of their family. And that's the true transformation that takes place when a family or an individual buys a Habitat home, is their accumulation of wealth that you're not able to do if you're just in rentals or just operating on lower income housing. We target, and nationally, and certainly here in the Baltimore area, we target a specific group, which is about 30 to 70% of the AMI, the average median income for the particular county. So let's take Sioux City, for example, and I don't know what the median income is there, but let's assume that would be about, let's assume that we would build a house in Sioux City that would value at maybe $200,000. So a really basic 3-bedroom house that would value at that. But then we would sell the family the home based on what they could afford. It's not based on the value of the house. It's based on what income, and it needs to be at 30% or less of their income. So that's the real key for that, and that's the real magic behind Habitat for Humanity, is that we're going to cover the difference between the cost of the house and the sales price of the house. And then we're also going to cover the gap between the affordability of the house and the 0% mortgage. So those are gaps that we cover along with being a construction company. And Habitat, at least 2 years ago, was the eighth largest home construction company in the US,
Wow.
but we all focus on these types of homes that we deliver. And it's all about home ownership for us because that's the transformation of generations.
And so one of the things I have a question about is the different chapters and groups of Habitat, like national organization, but let's say Sioux City Habitat. How is that? Is that any connection, or is there any, involvement with Baltimore? Or is it, like how does that structure operate and flow?
Sure. I like to use the word franchise, but that gets people off my. We officially use the term affiliate. So our national headquarters, Habitat for Humanity International, is headquartered in Georgia. And so they have about 1,000 affiliates within the US, and then about 150 affiliates throughout the world. And so part of what they do is they set the standards for all of the affiliates. So Habitat Sioux City, and I think there are about 40 habitats in Iowa. I worked with two of them very directly, the one in Dubuque and then the one in Sioux City. And they all had standards that they had to meet in order to call themselves Habitat. And so it was ethical standards, fundraising, and the type of the approach and all of that stuff. So it's guaranteed that they follow the same mission and the same integrity and the same quality of work throughout the country. But they're also independent. They do their own fundraising. There's lots of shared resources. They've operated by a local board of directors that are entirely accountable to them. But then they also contribute in part to the whole. So local affiliates like the one in Sioux City is asked to tithe their income to the national organization and specifically to a global partner. So that essentially, for discussion purposes, for every house that's built in the US, the tithe provides for a house in another country as well. And so then that's the connection that we make. And that's why I became so passionate about Habitat. Not only does it make the difference in my community, and I can see families' lives transformed when they move into that house and have a mortgage, and the lives of the children, the trajectory of the children are so changed, and there's so much research about this by having a stable house. But then I've been able to see in other countries and other cultures the transformation that is made when we go and build houses for them as well. So that's kind of the magic, and it's designed to connect the whole world in this one mission of having every person that's built on one core, every person has the right to decent home and to be able to afford living in a home that's decent. And that's the mission that's shared throughout the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the part that Habitat doesn't give the home, is something that I agree a lot of people don't understand. And the confidence and the sense of value people get when they do purchase their home from Habitat and they've earned it and they've, like you said, put sweat equity into it. I think that is truly an important part of the process that, people, the more we can educate them about that, I think the more value they'll see in that whole process. And yeah, I think that's an important thing that, they do a good job in Sioux City of explaining that too. And I
They
think
do.
that's super valuable. And, yeah, I love that. And I think it's a great thing. So, and I know that you've traveled and done some Habitat stuff overseas. And I think that's an important thing too, right? You call it like mission trip, or what's kind of the term that Habitat uses when people want to go over and be a part of an international Habitat? And what's
Uh,
that opportunity so people can kind of understand like, oh, I could do that as well.
sure. Yeah. So it's called Global Village. And so I will call it build projects or build trips and those types of things. And mission trip, all of those apply. So yeah, and so Habitat for Humanity has these. You can go to their website and see what trips are being launched now and which ones have space available. So anyone can join in. You don't need to have building expertise. As a matter of fact, building expertise may be a hindrance for you and may become a barrier because each country builds their homes differently. And we're going there to help them in their process, not to tell them here's how we do it in the US. So if you're willing to be a servant rather than the leader of the project is a really important piece. But my passion about this and why I love it so much from the first time I've done it, I love to travel the world and learn different cultures. But being able to work side by side with people from another country, you get to know them and you spend a lot of time and you find things to laugh about, you find things to learn, you understand different words and different foods. And you leave there with an appreciation and celebration about how community is the same anywhere in the world. It's just how it takes shape and how it's communicated. But that glue that holds this world together for its community and found in lots of different expressions. So that's what keeps my brain going and gives me excitement is just the diversity of the world, hearing different languages, eating different foods. To me, is celebration of God's creation at the highest level.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to do that someday. I need to, and I think that's something where, again, another mission where I can teach my kids. That's where my mind goes is I'd love to do this with my kids and get them that experience and introduce them to a new culture and kind of get them on that path early in their life so they can see how great people are, even if they're different. I think my parents did a good job with me of getting me outside of, I grew up in a town of 300 people. So I think
Sure.
I've said Petersburg, Nebraska in every one of my podcasts so far. So that's my hit of 300 people. So it's like getting me outside of that, I think was great for me and gave me confidence. And I want to do that same thing for my kids. It's
Well,
important to me.
the core life lesson that's learned from that too is valuing differences and valuing others. We have a great nation in the U.S. and we have a great culture, and absolutely we celebrate that. But the perception that it is the best way or the right way, or that and everybody else is different or wrong, is to me is not a helpful
Yeah.
perspective. And so that's the importance of. So I remember my first trip to El Salvador and my first build trip, and learning that they have a whole different style of how they build houses, and that works for them, and a whole different style of how they eat their meals and how they utilize tools and all of that. That made me into a learner rather than the typical perspective of being I'm in charge. And the openness to being led and to learning, I think does more to grow our character and to grow our faith than anything.
I love that. When you, when you, when you transitioned from the Warburg Seminary, correct? Am I saying it correctly?
Mm-hmm.
To Morningside, what is your kind of process for integrating to that community, building network, and starting to kind of, like you use the word tentacles, kind of just reach out and start to build those relationships that are going to be impactful and help you be successful in what you do?
Yeah, it's thank you for that question. So I spent 6 years almost 7 years in Dubuque. And the most difficult piece was, in addition to leaving Wartburg, which I was passionate about in their mission and still am, I was actually president of the Habitat Board of Directors at that time. And we had just launched into our major project, and I was so passionate about that, and I had to give that up and go to Sioux Cities. But clearly, to me, I need to find ways to build relationships and be in community. So my pattern has been to start with the people that I'm closest to and that I'm working with and see what they're engaged in and different community aspects that they're engaged in. The first thing I do, though, is find a church so that I can be part of that community. And I learn a lot of connections through that. And then I look for other nonprofits that are in the area and want to engage with them. And certainly business organizations and those types of things are all part of me building relationships and helping to identify building my community around me. Those are just always, and I'm driven to wanting to make a difference. So and this really is at the core of my faith and my understanding of why God has me in this world is to really being able to serve our neighbor in such a positive way that their lives are changed.
So, and like just thinking in my head, if someone is listening, they're a business person, like one thing I know about you, Paul, is like you're open to conversation and relationships. And that's probably, one of the big things, right? Is being able to go up and say, hey, I'm Jake, and I just want to get to know you, and value that relationship, whether or not anything, comes from it or not, right? It's like just having that, when you obviously going to church, you meet a lot of people there. When you're trying to make that first contact with somebody, is there something that, you know, you think is really important for somebody to have, or, to bridge that gap and start to build that relationship, I guess?
My core belief, and it's been the foundation of really most of my work in philanthropy and in nonprofit leadership, is clearly developing and building the muscle for listening, and for active listening. I used to lead workshops, and I had this long workshop for people brand new to fundraising. And so I would do this 2 hour where you learn the system of here's all the steps of fundraising and all of that. And I used to do that in the 2 hour session. I used to spend 10 minutes on active listening. The last year I taught it, I spent half of the time on teaching active listening and then less on learning the science and the steps of fundraising. And active listening is a genuine curiosity about the other person. And I was just reading an article last week on the leadership lessons from Ted Lasso. If you're Ted Lasso,
Oh yeah.
I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan, and there's so much. And he talks about that one session where he's having the dartboard about curiosity. And the reason that people always put him down is that they were never curious. So to learn about the other person, and that's to me the key in building relationships and actively hearing what makes the other person tick and what's important to them. Certainly, it's also a really great sales tool and a great engagement tool because then you can tailor your message toward that. But to be genuine means that you value the other person's story and you value what their passions are. And the more that you can hear that, because I get frustrated when I work with staff people that will come in and tell me what they said rather than what they heard when they engage with a donor or they engage with a prospect. I want to hear what you heard and how you repeat that back to them. To me, that's the most critical skill that I want to wave the magic wand to give to anyone in philanthropy is. And unfortunately, there are a lot of smart people out there who can teach this, and there are curriculums around the possibility of how to ask questions and how to engage and how to genuinely value who the other person is. That was a long answer, but that's something I'm passionate about. But
Yeah, and I think that's for me like the buzzword too of the curiosity side of it, right? And I laugh. My dad, he thinks it's so funny that my son asks a million questions because he's like, that was you. You never stopped. And I'm like, I haven't changed one bit because I'm genuinely curious about every single person I meet. And I really enjoy getting to know them. And yeah, and I feel blessed with that, and now that I have a kid that is similar to me, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if that's a blessing or not. But, I truly love it. And I love meeting people and I love that curiosity. And, I think the other thing, being curious and like you said, actively listening. And I try and always talk to, the people in my office about don't think about how to respond. Just take it in and enjoy what they're saying. Like when they're done talking, then you can think about what to say. And it's okay to have some space in there while you're thinking and let them know, hey, just I need a little time to think about that. Actually take it in and don't let yourself get caught up in thinking about what you should say, because being curious and really listening is so important. And you miss so much when you don't listen. When you're thinking about what you should say, you could really miss the keys of what makes that person, tick, and how you can make sure they feel valued. So curiosity is a huge thing. One of the things when I'm interviewing people, I always started off with, do you have any questions for me? And some people are like, this is an interview. Why am I asking you the questions? And when I hear that, I'm kind of always like, yeah, that's not what I want to hear, but I want them to be like, yeah, I want to know about this job. Tell me, all about it, and and ask me questions. Like I don't know. I love people that are, curious in my office too and care enough to ask really good questions.
Yeah, probably one of the greatest compliments I got when I left Morningside was one of my staff people there thanked me for teaching them about excellence, because I'm a strong proponent in excellence, but my definition of excellence is curiosity. Excellence is not perfection. Excellence is asking the question, how are other people doing it and how can we do it better? And the staff person let me know that totally changed their perspective on what excellence is about. I grew up so I was a debater in high school and college. And in debate, we absolutely train our minds. So, Jake, if I'm debating you in a formal debate, after you've had 10 words out of your mouth, I've already formed my argument against you. And I've looked for research. That's how I train my brain. That's the opposite of listening. Rather than training my brain to hear what you said, I'm training my brain to counter what I think is important. And that's that shift that I think really is important to take place. To use another sports analogy, this is going to be a basketball analogy, but what I do is I talk to them about the possession arrow in basketball. That used to be used a lot more than it is now. But every conversation, imagine there's a possession arrow right there. And every time you interject your own thoughts and your own ideas, you're turning that possession arrow to you. And if this engagement of this conversation is really about learning about the other person, visually make sure it's always pointed to them, at least as much as possible. And I think that's just a great skill for us to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, and you've already recommended a few books to me, but I always like to wrap the podcast up with a couple questions. And obviously, my favorite one is, what's one of your favorite books?
One of my favorite books, and actually I recommend this to everyone who goes on an international trip with me, is called The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And it's a story about, it's a novel. It's a novel from the 60s about a missionary from the South U.S., a Southern Baptist missionary that goes to Africa to try to explain Jesus to an African tribe. The whole novel, phenomenally well written, the most amazingly written book. But it's all about their willingness to adapt to other people. So the lead character, the pastor, absolutely refused to adapt to anything in the culture. But you see his wife and their children gradually transform and say, hold it, this culture has some clever ideas. I want to try that. Anyway, so to me, it's a great novel about understanding people can have hard times to change, but also then in terms of something that really can, as I start listening more and adapting, how I grow myself. So that's one that I recommend to everyone. Barbara Kingsolver, Poisonwood Bible.
Yeah, I'm looking that up tonight. I need a good novel to read. I like reading novels when I'm going to bed, so I'm going to pull that one out. Last question is, if you could do anything for one day and you had no responsibility, what would it be?
If I had no responsibility, so I wasn't accountable for the results,
Yep.
it's something I try to do. I want to go to a place I've never been. And again, that's something I try to do all the time. And just genuinely spend time learning about. And so if I could accompany a family in a foreign country, rich or poor, anything, just through their daily routine, because that tells me so much about their culture and so much about who they are. I'm a person of faith, and so my core Bible verse was always, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good work and glorify God. So to me, it's not about preaching to them, and it's not about trying to get them to worship the way that I do. It's trying to show what it means to be a person of faith to someone else, and that they learn from your example. That's what I would love to do, is be plopped in some place I don't know the culture and I can't speak the language, and being able to communicate and learn from others, because to me, that's where I see God present the most. But
I love that. If now I gotta pair that a little bit and just ask you a question on, if if you could watch baseball anywhere else but the United States, where would it be?
It would definitely be the Dominican Republic. I've done 2 builds there, and because I'm not smart enough to figure this out, both times I went, baseball was out of season. And so I'm going to do planning better next time. But there's something just so passionate about it. I would love to go to Cuba and watch baseball there because they have such a phenomenal level of baseball there that are played in cow pastures the way I grew up playing baseball. Except they do competitive teams and and there'll be fans come to cow pastures to watch people play baseball. That's the true sport. And they get so much more passionate about the sport than I think we Americans do here. I like my baseball to be, I like to be in my comfortable seat. I want to have the right beverages there. I know exactly where I sit in this stadium to have the best view. And then I sit there and will stand up occasionally. No, I want to be at a place that's so passionate about and just so anyway, long answer, but yeah, certainly someplace in Central America, but
Yeah,
Cuba, the Dominican Republic for sure.
yeah, and they have had some great ball players. I mean, yeah, now, I think, yeah, that's something that's probably per capita. They've probably had some of the best ball players, right? Like, and when you say the passion part of it and the culture, like it makes more sense why they've had so much success with such a small population. When I say success, just Major League Baseball players and stuff. But yeah,
So
that's be fun to
the
watch.
the Baltimore Orioles just built a training camp in the Dominican Republic, so
Really.
I'm waiting for my invitation to go to work there because I'm sure I'm needed there. So
So are they going to do like their spring training down there, or like what's their mindset with having a training facility down there?
it's a development. It's a development. So really, they're working on probably 10 to 20 year olds and helping them develop and stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
identify. So they're promoting their baseball down there, but also then getting the first track on where they want to play in the U.S. So
Yeah.
it's a great. I love that piece of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that's cool.
by the way, to be clear, I have only passion and fandom for baseball. I have absolutely zero skills for baseball. So
And unfortunately I did too, and I think my wife did too, and my kids, they play baseball and I love watching it and I love going to it. Part of it's one, like I love being outside, and when the sun's shining and I'm at a baseball, park, like that's awesome. And you're around people you can have fun with and watch your kid play. Like it's one of the best fan experiences as a parent, in my opinion, because the alternatives are it's cold or I'm inside, and those two do not elevate the experience for me. So, I really do love, and my son's like, I'm not good. I don't know if I want to play. I'm like, come on, I want you to play for me, and not because I want you to be good or anything, but I just love watching you, and I love the whole fan experience of watching you play baseball. So, if he plays, great. If he doesn't, that's fine too. But I hope he plays forever because I'll be in that stand and I'll be soaking up some sun, enjoying the heck out of it. It's a lot of fun to watch baseball, and yeah, it's a great
yeah.
experience.
If I can tell one quick story, and one of the greatest joys for me. So when I was at Morningside, I got to know a lot of the international students a lot, partially because I've traveled, so I knew their cultures and so. And I would go to soccer, and so a couple of students that would come by and visit me in my office are now in graduate school in New York City. So when I got here to Baltimore, I saw that the Orioles were playing the Mets. I went up there and I invited them to go to a game with me because I knew they didn't understand baseball. And my goal was that I was going to convert them into an Orioles fan. Absolutely sure. So we went to the Met Stadium and stuff, and they picked it up faster than anyone I've ever taken to. And to go from zero to fandom in baseball is complicated. The only problem that where I failed, the one person in particular is now a hardcore Mets fan. So I just failed completely. So, but they're coming down here for opening day for the Orioles. So I still have hope of converting them. But
That's awesome. That's awesome. It must, and it. I was a small Orioles fan when I was a child because my pastor's wife was a huge Orioles fan, and she gave me an Orioles hat. I was probably 8 or 9 at the time, so I wore that around. I don't know how long, and I was a semi. Yeah, was trying to think who the best player was back then. Shortstop, right? Why can't it?
Cal
Yeah, it
Ripken.
was Cal Ripken. I was a small
Yep.
Cal Ripken diehard, but then I saw Bo Jackson play, and I never was an Orioles fan again. I was either a Royals fan or a White Sox fan from there on. But
there's still hope. There's still hope for you, Jake. So
yeah, it's deep in my history. Yeah.
excuse me.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really appreciate you coming on. It was awesome to connect with you again and chat. And yeah, I'm just very thankful for the lessons you taught me and the things that I was able to learn from you and help me grow.
Well, Jake, thank you. Thank you for this vehicle and the chance to be able to communicate. Thank you for talking to me again and stuff, valuing and stuff. And thank you for the growth that you do and how you try to impact others to help them grow through their podcast, but also through the example that you give through your business on a day-to-day basis. So keep up the great work, Jake. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Paul. Have a good day.
God bless. See you.